Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining, and welcome to the 12th installment of the Digital Campfire Downloads, a series where I talk to the creatives and the entrepreneurs who are building and stoking the world's most interesting digital campfires right now. I'm Sarah Wilson, and for those of you who don't know me, I'm a digital content strategist based in LA. I created the term digital campfire to describe a type of online destination that's more intimate, more private, and more interactive than public-facing social platforms. I launched this series to meet the creative and entrepreneurial forces behind hyper-engaged digital campfires, with a goal to get inside them and really understand the strategies that make them burn bright, especially in a time of so much uncertainty. I couldn't be more thrilled to introduce my guest today, but first, just a quick bit of housekeeping. So I've muted all of you, so if you can't talk, that's why. The conversation is going to run about 45 to 50 minutes, and you're going to have a chance to ask questions at the end. I'll try to take everyone's questions. I've never had a situation where we ran out of time. We'll go over if we need to. Feel free to ask questions throughout the interview, though, via the chat feature in Zoom. And when I open it up at the end, I'll read them out. I can also call on you if you want to come into the discussion at the end. You can feel free to raise your hand via the raise hand feature, and I can unmute you, and you can actually, hang out with us and ask the question yourself. So also note that this is going to be shared out afterwards. It's being recorded. Also, I'm doing this from home, like a lot of you. So this has never happened before, but if we get disconnected, just come on and dial back in. So now on to my guest today, the co-founder of multi-platform media juggernaut Food52. In the 11 years since Food52's inception, the company has grown from a startup helmed by two former food writers to now one of the fastest growing companies in America. The brand draws serious eyeballs, 24 million people across multiple channels, from video to social, books to podcasts, and soon to events and brick and mortar. There's a major commerce element to the brand, of course, because if I'm going to go to the trouble of cooking a Food52 recipe, I sure as hell want to taste and look as good as it does in the pictures, which means buying all the things from serving platters to saute pans to make that happen. I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome my guest today, Food52 co-founder Amanda Hesser. Hey, Amanda. Oh, you have to unmute.
Sorry. Hi. Thanks so much.
Hi.
Great.
Of course.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'm really happy to be a guest. So thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, of course. And it looks like you're coming to us straight from your bedroom running a multi-platform media empire, which is how it is now, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm at my husband's family's house, and yeah, we're all working in our bedrooms.
Amazing. As it just has to happen. So I'd love to just talk a little bit about the overarching mission and kind of vision of Food52. Excuse me, of course, I have to clear my throat. One moment. Of Food52, and where community fits into that. So what is the mission of the company and where community fits into that?
Sure. So, we set out to create a world that, would, and it's sort of a place that had a sense of place that would, serve as a comprehensive resource for anybody who cared about, kitchen and home, and who saw food as, at the center of a well-lived life. Yeah. And we're betting on, what we were seeing happening culturally, which is we felt like there was this real sea change happening, that people were no longer seeing, food as this kind of niche, peripheral piece in their lifestyle, but actually it was actually the core of everything. Yeah. Like so many decisions that they made, not just what they were going to eat for dinner, but where they went on vacation, how they spent their time on vacation, how they designed homes, how they, how they socialized, where they shopped, what they felt like they needed to know about their ingredients. And then it really just touches kind of every aspect of one's life, and that this was, and people were starting to realize this more. And so that's, we wanted to create a company that served people in every way, as opposed to like just content or just helping them discover products or just getting them together. And that's where the community piece really comes in, because we understood that community had to be at the forefront, and really thinking about our community and our audience first is everything.
Yeah, very well said. I mean, I think community is used often interchangeably with the word audience. And especially with media companies, it gets thrown around a lot. But when done right, it's different. And so how do you define community specifically? What does it mean to you when you're sort of at the outset thinking about the birth of this company?
I think it's I think of it as, you know, a group of people who have shared sensibility and shared values. And that can take a lot of different forms. I think that a
Yeah,
lot of people have a very narrow sort of view on community, and community, especially online. I think that people think that community has to be all just like the super users.
right.
Um, you know, the people who are highly, highly engaged. And actually, when you think about like in real life communities, it's not really how it works, right? There are those people who are like
Right.
really active. You know, you see them at the PTA meetings, or you see them at, you know, they're really involved in local politics, or, but you know, there's most people are just, you know, maybe living nearby, like in a
Yeah.
physical community. And it doesn't mean that they don't you know, to have an important part in the larger sort of community puzzle. And I think that that's the way we thought of it, as like
Hmm.
you can get engaged and in a meaningful way, in a way that means something to you,
Right.
um, and be part of the community, without it being this sort of like narrow idea of a community. And that we felt like the sensibility, like our, you know, what we were putting forth as kind of our sensibility around and values around kind of like food and its importance in life, we felt like was, you know, is something that a very, very, very large community can share.
Right.
Of course, every community has its kind of like sub communities,
Yeah.
and that's something that I think you can help guide, and also just happens will develop organically. And I think we knew that going in. You don't know what
Hmm.
you're going what is going to evolve, but
Yeah.
that to us felt like a very natural thing to just kind of let happen.
Right. That's a really interesting distinction because it's true. There's various levels of
Yeah.
sort of who's in that community. I want to get into what you said about micro communities, but first I'd love to go back to kind of the early days. So it's 2009. You're launching Food 52. What does the online food landscape look like at that time? Am I right in that it's like Epicurious and Food Network, like just digital right now, just online? What are you dealing with?
Yeah. Yeah, it was these sort of larger recipe databases. Like
Yeah.
Epicurious was probably the most curated at that time, but there was all recipes. There was something called Recipe Czar that became recipe.com. It was bought by Food
Hmm.
Network. Food Network was just starting to like kind of put its content
Yeah.
online, but it was very much kind of like trying to translate show to digital. So there was the sort of bigger, these sort of bigger recipe sites. Then there were some commerce sites like Williams Sonoma, Sur La Table, some smaller kind of boutique sites. But you know, this was essentially kind of pre the Shopify boom. So like there weren't that many
Hmm.
sites that were really, you know, sort of gaining traction. And then there were a lot of blogs, and that was what
Yeah.
was really to us when we started seeing blogs crop up and really explode from like sort of 220, like 2005
Hmm.
on. We felt like that was a real signal that,
Right.
and of the, you know, of what everyone was betting on with the internet, which is that it was going to democratize content, and it was going to give voice to a lot of people who really didn't have it before, because they
Hmm.
were excluded from more traditional media. And
Hmm.
but the challenge, of course, with, you know, creating your own blog is that and we could see this would happen, is that, you know, there's a ton of people who have talent and have really great things to say, but in order to like build an audience and really
Yeah.
give you a reason to keep going with the work that you're producing as a
Yeah.
blogger, like you need to kind of build that following. And then
Yeah.
ultimately, just the way things work, like there would end up being this kind of thin layer at the top of people who were able to build bigger, you know, bigger food blogs, bigger home blogs, and then a lot of people who had smaller audiences and who might peter out over time.
Right.
And so we felt like that was a really interesting process happening, but that it was leaving out so many people. And we thought, well, if we can create a community driven platform where people can have voice on the platform and we build the audience collectively,
Yeah.
uh, that could be a way for all of these people who are on the sort of more of the periphery, who like maybe, they're a lawyer by day, but they're like an obsessed cook and they have really great things to share, but they're not going to like devote their
Right.
all the time to, building their sort of reputation in this space. They can have a voice and a place in a community like ours, as could, people who were more, who were experts and who wanted to just further their reach, through us. And so we felt like it was a great opportunity to create a new kind of place where people really had a meaningful way to express themselves.
Yeah, it's so interesting because what you did was really like read the tea leaves on sort of where people were netting out in terms of like the home cook, the obsessive, and in that middle category of people who like are excited and interested in this world, but maybe, like you said, are not going to go crazy and start a blog. That was a huge opportunity. And I think like, while the landscape looked very different in 2009, a lot of the same things still apply today. It's about like looking at the landscape, where's the interest? Maybe it's looking at a Reddit and saying like, oh my gosh, there's so much natural traction around this topic X, and building a community around it. So you're going into this, landscape, you're a brand new site. How did you get your first 100 visitors, let's say?
So, well, we were very lucky in that Meryl and I did a video just in preparation for launch many, many months before we were planning to launch. It was like a video kitchen tour of my kitchen in Brooklyn, and put it on Vimeo. And because like no one was really using Vimeo at the time, and like no one knew we were working on this, we didn't secure that, like we didn't block
Password.
Password. We didn't password protect the video. And, because we were like, we weren't trying to get it out into the world. We were just like, let's just store it over here until we're ready. And it turned out that Serious Eats, which is a pretty big site, found it and posted it and said, oh, something's up, they're building something.
Yeah.
And we were very lucky because we had a splash page up. Again, not something that we thought anyone would find, but it was a splash page where you could that could collect emails. And they drove so much traffic. We got thousands of email signups from that. And what happened was, because people always want to like find out like what's new, what's next, and sort of be on the inside track. Little did they know we were like, not like still figuring out a lot of things.
You're like, there's no inside track yet.
Yeah,
like, it's TBD on that track.
Yeah, pretty much. So what we did was, we saved obviously all those emails. They were like our sort of this precious commodity at that point. And when we were ready to launch, what we did was we actually did keep the site closed, and we had and password protected, and we did essentially like a closed beta where we allowed in like 200 people a day, and so that we could we were doing many recipe contests as a way to kind of like build content and community. And it was a way for us to kind of handle what's the influx, because it was just Meryl and me, really at that point. And it also just, so it gave us a couple of months. It was actually the summer of 2009 that we did, we basically let all the Serious Eats email signups flow in. We learned a bunch of things, and then in September we launched it. So yeah, it was really like a nice organic process. And it was easier to launch things then.
Very much so. Although the way you did it, the tactic of creating a small barrier to entry, everyone can't get in at once, and creating some buzz around it, whether it was intentional or not, is absolutely still a tactic that applies today. And I see like businesses do over and over again with a very simple landing page can work. So that's in 2009. I think it's hard to sort of remember that Instagram didn't exist yet, which is so interesting. Facebook did, Twitter did. It was like, obviously they were just starting to explode, but Instagram didn't. And obviously it's become so integral to the food world and to the building of the Food52 brand in general. So in those early days, like how did you leverage, I would say, I guess, Facebook and Twitter, but then eventually Instagram? And as you saw those technologies come up, was it just a no-brainer? Like, yeah, duh, we're going to build with these? or was it, oh shit, how do we do this?
No, it wasn't just a no-brainer because, and this is just a sort of consistent theme for most of the life of the business is that, we had very limited resources. So we couldn't just be producing content for
Yeah.
all of these different channels. We had to decide which ones we felt like were going to have real value. And I will get to like where I felt like we missed the boat and where we didn't.
Yeah.
But at the time, I also think our attitudes were different about social. Twitter, it was very common to like link off of Twitter. It was a way to like drive traffic to what you were doing. And that was like, it was a common practice. It was a user behavior that people did, and we saw them as essentially kind of like ways to distribute traffic to our site. I think our views, as well as pretty much everyone else's, have evolved to where we see like, sure, we want to have links that people can, so they can like get to a recipe page or whatever, but it's really, we're much more interested in developing community in those places and like just
on the platform,
meeting people where they are. And I think that like Instagram was the first platform where I felt like we really, that was when we really were like, we don't need them to come to our site with every post. Like, in fact, we want to give them something meaningful here. And so we really sort of changed the way we were producing content for Instagram. But so where I think we missed the boat was Pinterest. We just didn't have the bandwidth to devote to, kind of focusing on content there. And really, with every social platform, it's like, you have to really immerse yourself in the culture of its platform and then assess like, where do you fit in and how do you create a clear identity? How do you make it sort of meaningful for your company or your brand? So I feel like we missed the boat there. And we're playing catch up. Where I feel like we didn't was Snapchat. Like, where it was a lot of like, you gotta do Snapchat, you gotta get on Snapchat, discover. And I don't think it would have been bad for us too, but at that time, and sort of still, spending time on Snapchat didn't feel like it was a right fit for our brand, or the necessarily reaching the right kind of audience that we were for. And there was a lot of pressure. There was whenever it was growing so quick. It's like, if you don't get going, it's like, it's going to be too late. And I'm like really grateful for the decisions we made, because we didn't have the resources to put into it. Would have meant probably minimizing what we did on Instagram, which actually I think has really paid off. And now so TikTok has arrived, and TikTok, I do think there's a place for us, and we're playing around and trying to figure that out. I do, Reels is something that we're experimenting with. So we just, we do a lot of kind of just discussing internally, but we're definitely not going to cave to some pressure that, like, just because a social platform is getting traction, that it's right for us and that makes sense for us to do. Because I do think like there's now a lot of social platforms, and like just maintaining them takes a lot of bandwidth.
You need teams, especially with Snap. Like you need absolutely,
And I think the reality is that like, you can't just maintain them. Like, if you really want to create community and build a following, like, you have to be super creative and nimble and constantly iterating. And that takes a lot of additional resources. So I sort of feel like you kind of have to go all out or not.
Yeah, you absolutely do. I think that was a really interesting instinct, and it speaks to the power of prioritization and going yes to this, no to this, and how powerful that can be, especially in the early days of a business. Can you talk about some of those early community initiatives? There was a crowdsourced cookbook, right?
That's actually what we bootstrapped our site with. So as a published author, like, knew how to get a book deal. We felt like it was a good mechanism, a very kind of like help focus our community around a specific goal, which is, let's create this cookbook together. And also, again, like an opportunity for people who maybe are not, professional bloggers to, get their creative work, not only online, but into a published book by a major publishing house. Right. So it felt like it would allow us to, prove out whether our concept had legs, you know, of community, like building community through like
Yeah.
constructive contributions. And so that's what we launched the site with, was like in 52 weeks, we're going to create a cookbook
Wow.
together. So we did recipe contests every week, which allowed us to very methodically build out our recipe database.
Right.
But also, you know, it also gave us a chance to kind of like see who the talented cooks were in the community, you know, use a process that, you know, it's not, the community involvement wasn't just adding recipes. It was
Yeah.
testing the recipes. It was voting on the recipes, commenting on the recipes. And we, you know, we felt like every interaction mattered, and that it
Yeah.
allowed people to kind of come in at whatever level of engagement, and also like level of expertise that they wanted, and participate.
It's such a smart, you know, whether it's that mechanism or another one, it's having a built-in mechanism to solicit and, you know, create built-in interaction in your community, which this did. It's such a smart idea. So I want to kind of flash forward to now. So you obviously have a ton of different parts of the business. Which channels would you say your community primarily lives on, or how do you think about that? And do you think of your community as a cohesive whole, you know, the Food52 community, or composed of several different micro communities focused around personalities or groups? How do you think about that?
Well, I think I feel like it's important for us to have like a consistent enough kind of, again, like sensibility values that like, wherever the community is, it feels all of like one piece. So I would say that, I do think of it as one large community, but it does have its fragments, and there's a lot of overlap, right? There's a lot of people who follow us on Instagram who also like, you know, may come to our events, or, may come to the site for recipes or shop with us. And so it's not just like these very, you know, sort of discrete community segments, but actually like it's community is messy, you know, and that's okay. And I think it's, you know, and sure, there are people who sort of, wherever we're meeting them, they only kind of interact with us there, and that's fine. So, you know, I'm sorry, I feel like I lost the
No,
thread.
you didn't. I think of things like, well, I guess when I'm thinking of those micro communities, like around the, you know, Food52 baking Facebook group, like there might be people who follow you on Instagram who have no idea that exists, but then maybe you know, I don't know, the vice versa, because I feel like Instagram is really your main hub, but the experience of being in that group is a totally different one than one of just following on Instagram. And it's so, you know, it's much more hands-on, it's personal, things get really real in there, like it crosses over into other topics other than baking. I mean, it's like life. And so when you talk about connecting to people's lives, like you're doing that in different ways on different channels. So I just wondered if you have particular channels that you look at and you go, you know what, we're getting this really interesting community traction here. We're really building a lot. This is interesting. Let's look at this, whether it's a Slack channel or, you know, you don't have those, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. So just to throw out a couple of examples, you know, we developed a line of products called 52, and they are community driven. And this was something that we had been wanting to infuse in our shop, and we hadn't kind of cracked the nut. And so we because, you know, our shop was like, you know, it was filled with, we have a drop ship, just to sort of explain our shop. So we have a cooking and home shop. You know, we sell everything from like pantry goods to like pillows to bathroom, laundry, all
and
kitchen.
It's other people's, it's other lines. At the time it was other lines that weren't.
So it's largely like other companies. And sometimes we'll do product collaborations. And it's a drop ship business. So it's not that there isn't community, because of course, you know, there's community in the product reviews. There is also like what people buy, and like is essentially kind of like if there's a lot of people who are like searching for corn recipes, we'll create more corn recipes, right? We're listening to our community. Similarly, if they're buying like you know, a specific kind of saute pan, like that's a signal to us that they are caring about those features, and that we maybe need to give, sell different sizes of that saute pan, so we, but it wasn't like visible enough. And so we felt it was time to find a way to involve them more. And then we also wanted to do our own product line. So, it was like the light bulb finally went on that, like, well, actually, it's really interesting about sort of kitchen and home goods is that the consumer is extremely disconnected from why the products that they are using are like made the way they are, made with the materials, done, designed in a certain way. It's just like, they're very much broadcast at us, and then we decide whether or not we want them.
Right. You're not involved with that product development process.
Nobody's asking us, and us, meaning us who live in our homes, what we want. And what a missed opportunity, because in fact, like, everyone's an expert on their home. They know exactly like what works for them, what they like, what they don't like. There's this huge opportunity to tap into that. So we created 52 in order to do that. And so the way we went about it first was doing, a classic survey. Like we linked to a survey from email, from social, asking people like what features would they want in the ideal cutting board. And we got over 10,000 responses to a survey that was 11 questions, which is a long survey. And 5,000 of those people filled out the last question, which was a open field that just said, like, what did we miss? And there was such amazing detail and really helpful, useful feedback that, like, so we knew we were onto something, and we felt like, so we did social surveys, and we're still doing it that way. But what we realized was, like, wait a second, there's this group of people who really want to weigh in about products. Yeah. Why don't we create that, like, a subgroup for them? And so we have, what we call the 52 design team.
Okay, and that's not public facing. That's sort of like they know they're in it. How does one get in there?
Sign up for it. So we provide avenues. We don't actually like publicize it much, but we do have ways to sign up for it, and so then you get like kind of special communications, and we can use it as a way for, like, if we have prototypes we want tested, we can reach out to the design team, and so that's a way that, where we are kind of like listening to people and then creating a sub community based on what we hear.
How big is that group, and is it ever expanding, or are you keeping it sort of limited in size? I think a lot of people,
it's like 15 or 20,000 people.
Got it. But so more and more people can join. Yeah,
anyone can join. And of course, there are some people who are more, way more engaged than others, and that's totally fine. That's like what happens with every community. It's more about, like, just being, I think, inclusive and really listening and making it a valuable experience for people.
It's such a good takeaway to have that built-in mechanism. Again, you say you want to listen to your audience and you want to build with them. You have to create channels to do that, and you're clearly doing that. So how did that actually work with the home launch? Because you launched Home 52 earlier this year. And so how did this sort of community piece inform that launch? Was it the same? Did you do surveys? How did that work?
So that was, well, it's really interesting. We'd always wanted to get into home coverage from day one, because again, like, part of our, mission was, and also, vision was that your home is not like a separate place from your kitchen. Like, it's all of one piece, right? Right. So, but
it's so true. I've never thought of it. It's like, why is it bifurcated? It's the same.
It's treated like this, like, strange, like, other place in your house.
Right.
And well, no, it's actually
like very much part of the house.
Yeah, often the hub of the home, So trying to change people's mindsets around that. And we wanted to get to this as as a focus for content. But we hadn't gotten to it. But in our shop, we started selling home goods, and home goods were growing at such a fast rate that's when we were like, well, if people are trusting us to buy, like, laundry goods and, like, accessories for their living room, we should be writing about this. So that's when we've been writing about home for a while, basically ever since that insight finally occurred to us. then, and it wasn't just until recently that we had, again, like the resource to really kind of like devote, like hire an editor who's going to focus just on home. And now she's hiring, another editor to join her. And we launched our own Instagram account. And so what the community comes in, like, so I would say 95% of the photographs that are on our Instagram, Home52 Instagram account, are regrams from our community. And again, like that's sort of, our Food52 Instagram account is similar. It's, it's a large regrams of our community.
Yep, got it. It's just interesting how the food category is so removed from home. Like as you say that, I'm like, wait, what? That's so strange. I actually think you are one of the only brands I know of that's really prioritizing both in terms of a product mix together. Like when I think of other food media brands, it's not the case. So
it's residue from honestly like very old,
like almost malls
about like the kitchen is like
yeah, I think of it like the department store. You had the kitchen on one and home on 5. Totally. We hear a lot about community as this kind of external thing you do for your customers, but I think cultivating strong internal awareness of, like, call it the centrality of community as an organization is equally important. So to that end, can you speak about the hotline? Because that kind of touches both, right? Like, what exactly is it? If you could talk to people about that, and then to what extent do you feel that has helped really shape the Food52 community, both internally and externally?
And when you say internally, you mean our team?
Yeah, your team. Like, I think a lot of times companies say, we're all about community, but then they're not prioritizing it internally and saying, here's why this is so important. And here's, and teaching kind of internal staff to understand why and prioritize that in their own day-to-day interactions. But it sounds like, from what I understand, and maybe I'm wrong, the hotline really is part of that, because people are actually connecting directly with people, and your internal staff are learning about the customer needs, and then vice versa. They're actually getting a voice in the company.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to just take a step back, because that was something that we were really trying to solve for. Again, when I think going back to the very early description of like what we were trying to build, is we wanted this company that had a sense of place, because back in 2009, and I don't think this is so true anymore, but it certainly was then, is that just the internet felt so impersonal. And it was like, are there humans behind this website? Like what?
Knock.
And we felt like and you kind of you would often hear, especially from investors, like, well, that's not, like being personal isn't scalable. And we basically set out to like prove them wrong, because we feel like actually being human and personal is like sort of innately built into us, and so important. And the scale of the internet can't stop that. And so it's just so important, I think, in this topic area. It's like food is so personal, it's so emotional. It's like, you have to have the personal for it to be successful.
It would be weird if it wasn't.
Yeah. And we also understood that if you're going to build a brand, like you have to have an emotional connection with people. They have to trust you. They have to like feel like they have a relation, and not feel, but like have a relationship with you. And so we used to say a lot in the early days, kind of like, we don't have a community, we are the community. And we said that a lot internally, because we wanted to infuse this understanding that like, you're not just like working here, you are part of our community. And so, like, we want you participating and in whatever ways that makes sense for you. And so, whether that's one of our engineers, like getting back to somebody about a technical issue that they're having and doing personal fashion, or if it's our customer care responding to someone, the hotline is a section of our site that grew out of something that we were just seeing happen in comments, comments on recipes and articles, where someone would ask a question and then like a bunch of community members would leap in and answer. And then there's these sort of micro discussions happening. And we thought, well, the thing with cooking at home is a lot of people have questions, right? And sometimes they're basic and sometimes they're intricate, and there's a lot of people who have knowledge to share. So if we created a place where you could ask any question and it was answered by either us or somebody in the community, it felt like a way to again, like create, like we believe in constructive community, like giving people like things to do that are additive. And we felt like that was a very good way to do that. And it's like, it's chugs along as this kind of self it's like a self-cleaning oven, it kind of just does its thing, and I mean, I hop on the hotline a couple times a week, and similarly, like, it's very much encouraged internally that, like, if you put up a recipe or an article, if you're one of our like writers or contributors, like the expectation is you will answer every question. Because if somebody has taken the time to like either make your recipe or read your article, like we want them to know that they've been heard.
Yeah. And is it just Food52 staffers who answer on the hotline, or is it actual other community members?
Any community member.
It's community members. So, yeah.
Now it's mostly community members.
Yeah.
And we do staff it during the week leading up to Thanksgiving. So that no one has to wait, more than 10 minutes for an answer. So like we all take shifts, and it's really fun. And we have this like, spread, very big sort of Google spreadsheet of like resources, so that anyone who's that are like typical questions we hear during Thanksgiving week. Like, why is my why is my turkey purple? Which people don't cook turkey that much, and it actually does have a like purple hue to it when it's not cooked. And so if you're only making it once a year, people like inevitably freak out. They're like, something's wrong with my turkey.
Right. Really, the purple turkey question always comes up. It always comes up. But you make such a good point, because when investors are telling you this isn't scalable, it's like, actually you've empowered community members to answer those questions and kind of be little soldiers for your brand. And that is scalable. Like, that is the definition of scalable, right? Like, you've empowered them to go and answer those questions. You provided a forum. Obviously, Thanksgiving is the exception when you're getting the staffers, but it's a really great strategy that I think any business, big or small, can take. It's like, build this community, empower them, create strong leadership, but then empower them. I'd love to talk about the role of food personalities, call them influencers, whom you as a brand are cultivating, and where that fits into your overall community strategy, because you've done that in various ways from the start. So I'd love for you to talk about how that's, the history, and then how that's evolving.
Yeah. I mean, we have a lot of people who like started out as community members, recipe contributors, contributors to our recipe contests, who, have gone on to write books, who have gone on to, get, jobs at food media companies, and like, obviously we are not the, like reason for it, but I feel like we gave them either a platform, or and we did what we could to nurture their talent, and that, I think, is something we'd hoped from the beginning, and it's been really nice to see. And I think that just I think really this again comes back to this like a notion of like sort of personal touch and not feeling but I think the internet has really swung back to like really wanting to, people want to connect with a human,
with people.
And I think that, especially around food, like we've seen that our content that really, especially video, like people want to feel like a connection with who they're watching, and that's just as important as the food that they're making, or whatever they are talking about. And so I think that's something that you'll see a lot more from us, and just as we expand our content, we've had a lot of like, Kristen McGlory, she's our a creative director. She writes our most popular column called Genius Recipes. She also happened to be our first hire. So she's hung with us for, almost 11 years now. And her column has turned into best-selling cookbooks. She has, a really popular video series. She's about to launch a podcast. And so that's something that has completely grown organically in-house. And we have, I think, more talent in-house to be developing, but we're looking to work with outside contributors. And so Erin McDowell is another one of our really she's really popular on YouTube. She has a series for us called Bake It Up a Notch, and she was a community member who we loved her recipes. We were like friendly, chatty by email. And one day our test kitchen manager was sick. So we called up her and we were like, hey, can you come and like cook in our test kitchen today? And then that led to her being becoming our test kitchen manager, and then like, you know, becoming a columnist. And now she like writes for, you know, she does work for the New York Times, she does work for BA, but you know, we've still kind of kept her in our circle a little bit, which is great. But yeah, like we love that. Like that to us, like a great community success story, right? It's like, we've done something together. You know, and it's been really amazing to see her career flourish.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and it also is such a key part of your strategy. You mentioned podcasts. So your podcast network is launching, as I understand, this fall. Yes. And talent is sort of a key part of it. So, right, Kristen's show is going to be like the flagship, and then you'll build others. Is that right?
Yeah. So yes, we have another one that we've developed internally, and then we're developing a couple of others with outside contributors, and then we may also partner with some existing podcasts that you know, people who kind of go it alone, where, you know, they're dealing with the monetization as well as, but we might sort of kind of pull them in, and so we can help them with monetization, and they can help kind of broaden our content. But yeah, we've also developed a residence program where we've approached a number of people who have a following around specific topics.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about this. This is so novel as a strategy.
Well, so we the way we've been thinking about it is like, we've been very generalist in many ways up until now. And now we feel like our audience is at a scale where we'd love to be able to, and also we have more resources. So like, we would love to be able to, you know, we know there's a huge bread baking community. So like, I think you actually asked about this before, and I meant to mention this, but on Instagram, every time we do anything bread related, it gets a ton of likes and a ton of traction.
And that's not just in the quarantine pandemic world?
No, it's not.
Okay.
Yeah, it's ramped up, of course, because of quarantine, but it's always been a known sort of thing for us. And so we just felt like, well, wouldn't it be great if we actually could bring in somebody who already has a following in bread, who can really just like focus on this content and produce more of it for us, and create ideally a real connection between him and our community of people who care about this, and some, you know, maybe some people who are intrigued, but, you know, haven't you know, they're like looking down into the rabbit hole, but they haven't gone in yet. So like, so we're looking to do that across topics, and then also like, you know, with work with some people who are just like, we feel like have, you know, are just like really great at connecting with people through things, through mediums like video, or, you know, through the kinds of recipes they produce. And so yeah, I mean, ideally we would, you know, like in a year from now, we would have a bunch of people across podcasts and video and our social channels and our site who our community feels like, you know, they're following.
Yeah, I think the bread thing is super interesting. You mentioned 3 key categories, I think, that you have identified that like crazy, almost rabid fan base around. I think you said bread, spirits, and what was the other one?
Well, we have pasta. That's, yeah, it's massive. And actually we also are doing something that's focused on actually just cheese plates, which is like hyper niche.
Just cheese plates, not cheese, just cheese plates.
Yeah, but that to
like
me feels like, yeah. So yeah, and we're continuing to kind of expand upon that. We just started with a few categories that we felt like were very sort of sure bets, and then we'll go from there. We have a couple, you know, I'm excited to be launching a couple soon, but I can't talk about them yet.
That's no problem. I want to understand just specifically dig in on the strategy around those key categories, because I think it's super interesting. It's that you're connecting, like what you said before about the bread guy, but you actually have a person in every category, a spirits person, who you've identified. Can you talk a little bit about the process of identifying those categories within your team, like how you came to that rather than just Instagram, there's traction? Because it sounds like there was a lot more. And then secondly, you know, how you found those people as the right fit for those categories. And I can pop them in the chat because there's 3 people. I think apartment bartender is the spirits guy, then there's the bread guy, and then there's the resident pasta maker.
Yeah. So we didn't, like we did it in a very, like I would say, we are very collaborative internally, which I think is a real strength of ours, and also complicated because like, we want a lot of people to kind of weigh in on things, and but you can imagine just like setting up meetings and stuff when you're including a lot of people. So what we did was we brought together our head of SEO, we brought together people from our marketing team, we brought together our social team, or people from editorial, people from our brand partnerships team, and to sort of figure out the topics, and obviously some topics were more important to some than others, and then we just kind of like whittled it down from there. And then once we had the topics determined, it was really like, hey, who do you like to follow? Who do you think is really interesting? And we actually weren't necessarily focused on people who we already were working with, or who were interacting with us in some way with our community, but like, hey, is there somebody who maybe our audiences haven't connected, but they really like, feel like they could be additive to each other? And so we really just like made lists and like all like, sort of added thoughts, and it was very subjective. I mean, obviously we were trying to balance kind of like Instagram or like, social following with also like, people do different things, and we didn't want to be cut and dry about it and be like, okay, you have to have X number of followers and you have to be able to produce recipes and video. Right. And we really want to work with creative people and try to build up what they love doing. I think after many years of working with creative people, like the biggest mistake is to try to put them in a box, right? Like you have to let them run free and like, and like be there to support them. Right. And so we went at it in that way. Like, so we literally just called people up and said like, hi, we would love to talk about the possibility of working together. What are you looking like? What do you wish you could do?
Very cool. It's much more collaborative than going like, we want to work with you, we'll pay you. It's more of a relationship building.
Yeah. It's like build the relationship, really understand what like what they can do. Like, and some of them have, side jobs, or some of them have other deals, and like, figure out what works best. Oh, sorry.
No rush.
Sorry, I thought it was in the other room.
Don't worry.
Hold on one sec. Sorry.
I love it. This is, guys, it's a live show. So you can start to pop your questions in the chat, and I can start to take those when we, in a few minutes. No problem at all.
Notifications. I thought I got it all right. Anyway,
we've all been there. We've all been there.
Phone got me. All right. Sorry. And sorry, I can't remember.
The micro influencers. Okay. So how you cultivated them. Yeah.
And then, I mean, we're pretty new at it at this point. Like we just got these handful, and learning from them and sort of seeing like what content of theirs is like really resonating with our audience. Like, but we're not just tracking like success for us. We're also tracking like, are we helping them build their Instagram following? And obviously we can't track that in a very precise way, but we can look at like, what was their Instagram like, or overall social following. I'm saying Instagram because a lot of the people we work with are big on Instagram. But like, what was it when they started working with us? How, like, what's the rate at which it's their following is growing? Because, I think it's really important that like any partnerships that we do are really mutually beneficial. Like, it's not just about the money or about them getting on a platform, because like that, it's for us, like it's, we want it to be so that they're excited to be introducing their followers to us. And,
it's a much different relationship, and it sets a different energy, like a different tone for the whole thing when you're approaching it that way than it does with a typical brand who might just enlist an influencer to promote their product or their media brand. Can you talk about some of your biggest missteps in building Food52? I mean, I mentioned Pinterest as sort of missing the boat on that. Would you say there are other major ones, I guess specifically since this is the topic of our conversation around community and building community?
Yeah. Okay, so sure. I feel like we've failed at the app game. Like we've gone down that road a couple of times. And most recently, we actually, I think it was a word. I think anytime you experiment and try to iterate, like it's worthy even if it fails. Because if you're not doing that, you're just failing all around, right? If you're not doing it. And I want to get back to that because I think COVID has had a tremendous impact on our company.
I was going to ask that at the top of the show. Like, you're running this company, it's obviously been a massive, new interest of the nation and the world. So yeah, please go ahead and speak to that. I'd love to.
Okay, great. So just quickly, like we were noticing that on Instagram, a lot of people were like sharing all these food photos, and I mean, obviously, but it was like not totally satisfying. It felt like there wasn't a way, like it was like stuff that was really pleasing to look at, but unless you linked off to like a full recipe, like you didn't get, like it wasn't something that you could apply to your life necessarily, unless you're like a super experienced cook and you're like, could just look at a dish and sort of figure out what they did. At the same time, we also felt like people who create recipes, it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of time to like create and develop a recipe and put it on a site like ours. It's a big commitment. So what we felt like, there was all these people who are like creative, talented cooks who were kind of being left out of being able to express and share what they were doing. And so we had this thought of like, what if we created an app that was like, would kind of function like Pinterest, Instagram, where you could like kind of shared your food photo, but then you could leave a caption, and we could kind of basically with technology, like pull out the key elements of the recipe from your caption and like kind of like create an ingredient list. Cool. So that it was a way to kind of get at a recipe in a more casual way, the way that you kind of like talk about recipes with your friends or your family, like, oh, well, I just threw this in a pan and then I did, added some onions and so we built that, and like a lot, like 1,000 really great people used it.
And then it maxed out.
And it was like, man. That was too bad. So that was a fail. And that's like for a company like ours, that's that's a lot of resources to spend on what's ultimately like a lesson in failure. But so that's that. COVID, obviously it's like I just want to preface this by saying, like, not just trying to like put on rose-colored glasses on on a terrible situation, because I think like what we've learned and what we've benefited from, like obviously we wouldn't wish for. This has been a really difficult time. But it is a time that has underlined, I think, because clearly because everyone has been forced home, and I think forced to reassess what home means to them, and like and how important it is to be able to like feed your family and be able to get food and have a place where you feel safe and comfortable and happy, and that that fact, this thing that has happened, just really underlined our mission and validated it in a way that hadn't, like we knew its importance, but like we're really obsessed with this, right?
Right.
And felt like, it's understandable that most people on a day-to-day basis we're not as conscious of it. I think a lot of people really are now. And so it really has been, I think, a moment of like inspiration for us to kind of double down on like what we're doing really is valid and has meaning in the world. It's not just a fluffy like lifestyle business, but that actually like your home really matters. And so, so I think that's been important. But the other piece of it was that, like, we used to do all of our videos in like a really snazzy studio, and, we did all our photography in a studio, and we, everything was kind of just so. And we'd kind of gotten away from our much looser kind of, when we did videos when we first launched, they were in my kitchen. We shot all of the photography in my bedroom, like everything kind of, we were winging it, right? But it had a real feeling of realness. And so we had to totally change the way we do things. And I actually think it's been a huge like moment of energizing to our company, because we realize how much we can do with our sort of constrained circumstances, and that actually people, it's not just that we're able to produce the content and like keep going, but that actually our community, again, getting back to the personal touch, like has really responded well. They're like, I can't tell you the number of people who leave comments on our videos that say, please don't go back to your studio.
Right. We don't want that polished look. We like it. It's actually really helpful. So we're approaching the top of the hour. Do you have a hard stop, or can I grab you for a couple more minutes?
Hold on.
We have some questions.
You know what? I do have a hard stop, but so I'm so sorry, but let's maybe can we talk till like 2:02?
Of course. Let me take a couple questions from the group. So Larry's asking, can you talk about some ways in which an idea that bubbled up from your community worked well, or an idea you or the community thought would work, but for whatever reason didn't? Obviously, we talked about the app. So maybe something else other than that. So something that worked well and something that didn't, that came from the community.
Well, I will say that there are a number of things on recipe pages are really complex, and people want a lot of functionality out of them. I'm sorry if this is kind of a boring answer, but it is true. We spent a lot of time thinking about recipe pages, and there are a lot of functionality, like I want to print it without the photo, and I want to be able to, save it in this way, or like be able to organize all my recipes in that way. And I want to be able to there's a lot of kind of like crossing of content, pulling it from different areas. And I mean, it's all like technically feasible, but it's actually like, again, one of those things that would take a team like an engineering team like ours a lot of time to build. And we have found that it hasn't always paid off. Like we've done a lot of, we've reworked our recipe page several times. We've built in a lot more functionality, and you find that actually it gets used pretty minimally. So there's a lot of, there's the kind of squeaky wheel thing that you have to always sort of adjust for. And I think that we really especially people who care about our recipes, we want to give them what they want, but ultimately from a resource standpoint, it probably doesn't make sense to give them everything that they want. And we have to sort of constantly struggle with this.
Balance.
And I don't think we've always succeeded.
Okay. I'm going to ask how old is your community? And I think what Susan means there is age. Do you have a sense of how it breaks out?
Yep. We have two very large blocks. We have like the two primary blocks are like millennial, sort of skewed younger, sort of younger millennial, I would say. And then like 45 to 60.
Wow.
I see you waving. But I will say that interestingly, like when we launched for the first couple of years, we were largely 45 to 60. And then as social grew, it just like sort of, we got in front of a younger audience. And I think it's really, I personally like love the fact that we have like good amounts of people in each, like kind of every age group. And of course it's like a disaster for like ad sales, because they want to be able to go to a brand partner and say like, we're all a millennial, or we're all this, right? We're not. But if you're thinking about your business in a long term, like I love it because we can serve people really, really well in many different ways. Because you think about your life stages, like what you put in your kitchen and how you outfit your kitchen when you're in your 20s is extremely different from when you're in your 50s. And if we can, or like when you're getting married, or when you're having kids, or like, and if we can be with you and serving you differently and but usefully in each of these different stages of your life, and again, like build that relationship in a lasting way, like to me, that's success.
Thank you so much. I am going to let you go because I see it's 11:01. Oh, it's 11:02 here in LA. And I just want to be respectful that you have another meeting to get to. We unfortunately did not get to every question. I'm so sad because that never happens. But perhaps Kelsey, I know, is on this call. Maybe we can get some of those questions answered by email if possible. But I'm
and I'm so sorry I have to run.
No, not at all. We're so grateful for your time. This has been one of my favorite interviews of all time. I love your brand, and I think everyone on here can agree with that. So thank you so much, Amanda. And thanks for everyone for joining and asking such great questions. I will do my very best to get answers by email.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. All right.
Okay, take care.
Talk
Bye-bye.
later. Bye.